Hi, all. I am so excited to introduce this book, No Problem Parenting. For those of you who are parents, did you ever have problems with your children? I did, but I also had problems with myself as well. I'm going to be bringing up one of our authors today. We're going to be bringing up Ruthanne Warnick. And Ruthanne, I'm excited to interview you today because this is a topic that goes really deep for me because I always said I was a terrible parent. I was a terrible parent. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. But I want to find out, like what was it about this book that made you decide to join us?
Well, when we think of no problem parenting, we think exactly just as the word says, we think of problems, like the problems we have with our children and how do we get through the problems. My chapter in this book might be a little bit different than some of the others because I'm talking about not so much preventing a problem or how to handle a problem, but how to create almost the opposite of a problem. So how to use stories, family history, to build a relationship with your child, separate and apart. What I'll call, traditional like raising the children. It is part of raising the children, and so this just focuses not on the problem part, but how do you build confidence and relationship with your children through family stories, relationships within the family, but not just the immediate family. In other words, your parents, your grandparents, I should say the parents, right? The grandparents, the aunts and uncles, and how does that connect the child that you're raising? How does that connect them with your family? And quite honestly, we also have a tendency to think of no problem parenting when the children are young. But as a parent myself, parenting really never ends. There's just different relationships and different phases. So using family stories is something we can do from the get-go and all the way through our lives and our children's lives.
Oh man, I have so many things that just popped up right now. And one of those that I want to address first is oftentimes as parents, I can only speak about myself and my own beliefs, but my belief is that oftentimes as parents, we don't want our kids to see us vulnerable because we see humans, I think, a lot of times see vulnerability as a weakness. But I truly
Mm,
believe that vulnerability is our greatest strength as human beings. Because when we can
mhm.
share our vulnerability, other people connect with us more easily. And the reason I share that is because, like, my dad never told his story. And I only heard bits and pieces of his story from my mom. Now, had he told me his story, would I have had different thoughts and feelings about him? I always saw him as a monster. He was an abusive alcoholic, and that was how I visually saw him, was an actual monster. But but if I had known some of his story, might I have forgiven him earlier?
Mm,
Might I have had some understanding at a younger age instead of at age 51 after he
mm,
was already gone?
right,
Might I have been able to see him as a human being who had challenges too? I don't know the answers to any of those questions,
right.
but I love this, Ruth Ann, because it begs to question, what does that mean by sharing our stories? As you, the title of your chapter is Matters of Life and Death, Why Connecting Generations Through Family Stories is More Important Than Ever. And right when you just like right out of the gate, what you said there, it just made me immediately think about how that could have been. I don't know, but that could have been a game changer in my own upbringing and my own beliefs of my family history. So please speak on that. Counsel me.
Yeah. Well, we we have wisdom and lessons that we can teach. Now, in your particular case, if your father was going through stuff, we'll call it, there wasn't necessarily a calm time for him to be sharing those things, but certainly later on, adult to adult, there could have been, like you said, there could have been a different way of traveling through that relationship with your dad. But from the get-go, from early childhood, think about if we're telling stories, or you have a child who's going through something difficult, and now difficult could be something that they perceive, as a young child, what they consider difficult could be, something that happened at school. It's not necessarily a major life event, but regardless, if they're going through something, just to be able to say, when grandpa was your age, he told me a story that, and then fill in the blank. Or, when I was 7, I had the same thing happen to me, and this is how I handled it. So it's not about let's sit down and tell the stories. It's how do we incorporate the family stories into our everyday conversations, our lives. There is an aspect of it for sure where you might want to be interviewing someone, or you are sitting down and you are intentionally and deliberately capturing stories and memories. There are other aspects though to it as well. So when my father passed away, I was 40, and that was the point at which I realized how many stories were lost, not just his, but family history and connection, and all of the questions that we didn't ask, and all of the ways we could have enhanced our relationships with our grandparents and other family members. And it's very easy to take those relationships for granted. And then, of course, that's why I say it's matters of life and death. We don't want to wait till someone dies necessarily to then first share the stories. What are things that it's about living, and it's about the matters of life and death, as I named the chapter. But so in your particular case, which you brought it up, is sometimes there are relationships like that, and what can we, is there wisdom, are there lessons learned, is there something we can gain from it, as you said, so that earlier in your life you might have had some peace with your relationship with your father, even if he was already gone. But I encourage families to use family stories in the many ways that they can. Look, they are a way to make sure that we carry the people who are gone, that we carry them forward, and the memories that we do have, but they're also a way in the living to use stories to build relationships within the family. So that's why I thought No Problem Parenting was a great place to write this chapter, because parents have such a beautiful opportunity to give their children solid grounding where they belong to. This is how I view it. If you're connected within your family and you're solid in that, then you can connect with your friends, your larger circles, your community, ultimately, maybe even globally, as an adult. But that core solid connection is so important.
Okay. Wow. I don't think we have enough time today to cover everything. Let me just say that. But there was something there were a couple things you mentioned that I have to pick because of our time. I have to pick out, which one I want to talk about. And I think it's because you mentioned questions not asked.
Mm.
And when I was growing up, I had fear over asking questions. And so what came to mind, and I don't know if this is something you do, but I'm going to share with you my thought, and what came to mind is some kind of like a family icebreaker game, where maybe there's a bunch of random questions that can be asked, and maybe it's like a board game or something, I don't know, and where there's these random questions, or these questions that you can ask, but you're asking them in a playful environment because you're playing a game. And so
Right.
maybe, for me, because if somebody had said, go ask your dad this question to find out, whatever the question is, that I would have had so much fear in asking him. I would have been terrified, and I would have agonized over the question for weeks, possibly months, because I just had a lot of fear, in my household. And so I'm curious that the questions not asked, like, are there some, if somebody were talking to you right now and they said, what's one question I should ask? What would that question be?
I would say, if you What is the one thing you would want to know about your grandparent or great grandparent? Like, what is it that you would want to know? And then that's what you should share. So if you would want to know from your grandmother, I'll use my grandmother as an example, one of my grandmothers. One of my grandmothers was an immigrant from Eastern Europe. She, at the age of 16, came to the United States, made a whole life for herself. She was 16 years old. She, she found a job, she got a job, she got married, she built a whole life. But she died when I was, probably around 10. And
Mm.
so I got to know her. I would want to know from her, like, how did you do that? It wasn't like you jumped on a plane back then and said, oh, I'm going to fly to New York and I'm going to make a life for myself. I mean, you had to get permission. Someone had to sponsor you. You had to get on a ship. So I was like, what was that like to be able to have that much moxie almost to just
I
get
had to be
on
a
a ship at
Titanic,
16?
right?
Yeah. And how did you how did you navigate all of that? And to me, that would almost be like not just lesson learned, but almost like a role model, because we're talking
Yeah.
about that was around 1910.
That's what I was going to
So
ask you what year that was. Yeah.
yeah, so those are early
Okay.
1900s. So if you think about that time, I mean, there's all sorts of things. Women didn't even vote in this country yet at this time. I mean, there were so many things going on in our country at the time. So you say, what was it that was going on, which I know the answer to now, but what was it that was going on in your life that pushed you away from that, that just like many immigrants, opportunity for sure, but those are questions I would want to know from her. So I think, okay, someday maybe my kids or grandkids will want to know, like, what was your journey, your geographic journey, your personal journey. So that would be my advice. It's a long answer to your question. Is like, what are questions you would like to know, and then incorporate those into what you're sharing.
I love that. I love that. My parents are both gone, so I can't do that in real life, but I can ask those questions. I can ask some questions. There have been some questions that I have like made up my own stories, which have changed. By the way, I went through a forgiveness and a gratitude journey for my dad. So after he was passed away, so I
Mm-hmm.
no longer see him as a monster, but I see him as a human being who, he didn't know what he was doing either, with
Right.
raising kids and stuff. And I see that there were some challenges. I know that there were some challenges in his life, but I never took an opportunity to get to know him, as
Right.
a
So if
human
you
being.
think about that and you think about the wisdom and the personal peace and other benefits, if you will, that you've received from going through that process, there are so many lessons and wisdom packaged just into that topic to share with your children. You said you are a parent. So just
Yes.
those, you're talking about forgiveness, you're talking about her, but you're also talking about finding your own personal peace and not having to carry these weights through. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in terms of wisdom and lessons learned just right there. So
Oh, I love it. Thanks for that. And just give me some ideas, time to talk to my own children and
yeah.
instead of making them come to me. Right. And so that's
Yeah, they
fantastic. Oh
aren't going
gosh.
to come to you. So that's the whole thing, is that
Right.
they probably aren't. Although the game idea is a great thing. I have a couple of other ideas that I suggest that families can also do, but that's a great idea. Like, you want someone to say, what? It's like, you did what? So,
Yeah.
things you never knew kind of thing. But
Fantastic. Well, gosh,
yeah.
we are out of time, and so what I want to do is just direct everybody to go to oops, the wrong thing. actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP. Get your copy of the book, No Problem Parenting. Ruth Ann's story is in there, as well as several other, amazing, amazing people that can help you through, different parenting issues that you may be experiencing. In addition, a lot of our authors have given free gifts, so go over there and cash in on those free gifts as well. So, Ruth Ann, the very, very final question I have for you is, what is one thing that you would like the readers to take away from when reading this book?
Be proactive, incorporate family stories and family history, wisdom lessons, all, even the funny memories, silly memories, incorporate all of it into your daily, or if not literally daily, but your everyday, we'll say your everyday living, but also make sure that you're capturing the history and past stories as well. So just make it a priority and avoid the regret of the I'll do it someday, and then someday never comes.
Oh, I love that. So true. And you can connect with Ruthanne at capturethejourney.com. That's capturethejourney.com. Ruthanne, thanks so much for being here. I truly appreciate what you do. And it's been a pleasure. You gave me some really great ideas. Some thoughts are swirling all over my head. And I can't wait to call my daughter. Actually, I'm talking to my daughter tonight. And I'm going to, we're going to broach part of that equation of what we talked about today. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Linda. This was great. And as you said, we could talk for quite a while about this topic, but thank you so much for the opportunity for this snippet. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. And stick around. We'll be right back.
One of the things that I've personally found from my experience of working with Action Taken Publishing is that I've walked away with more friends than I had before because of the relationship that you build with the authors while working in an anthology. I think it's an amazing project to be able to get published. It's a fantastic way to get published the first time, and I've almost seen people who get hooked on doing anthologies because once that bug is bitten, you feel like you can release more and more and more and more stories. And Linda's got a bunch of titles that I think resonates with a lot of us who live in the real world.